Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar, Realizing a Return on Your Social Marketing Investment. Now today we'll be covering strategies behind the monetization of the social marketing channel. Special thanks to Facebook for sponsoring the webinar today and for offering some insights into how businesses can get help with their marketing needs. My name is Justin Bridigan and I'm with MarketingSherpa, and we're broadcasting today live from our Mech Lab studio here in Jacksonville, Florida. Now I'll be your host to get us started, and John Hosier, my sidekick. Say hello, John.
Hello, everybody. Happy afternoon.
Yes, we'll be here monitoring questions and doing the polling for us. Now, we have 60 minutes of packed information that we know will be valuable to you and to all of your marketers that are out there. So make sure that you pay attention, and just so you know, we will have this presentation given to you after the webinar has concluded. So let's go ahead and introduce our first expert speakers that we have for us today. Sergio Bolaño is the Director of Research for Mech Lab's Content Group. He leads a distinguished team of industry analysts who research, write, and speak about what works and what doesn't in marketing today. Now, he's our fearless research leader and has been the lead on many of our publications, including the Social Marketing Roadmap Handbook that we're going to be discussing today. Sergio, it's great to have you with us.
Thank you very much, Justin.
Megan Lockwood is a research analyst at MarketingSherpa, and she focuses on landing page optimization. She is the lead author of the upcoming 2012 Website Optimization Handbook and a contributor to the 2011 Search Engine Marketing Benchmark Report, especially the PPC edition. Now, she is responsible for compiling benchmark data and insights that can be used to guide marketers' strategic decisions and tactical planning. Megan, we're very excited to have you with us as well.
Thanks, Justin. I'm thrilled to be here.
All right. So thank you today for both of you for speaking and sharing your insights with us. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit about how we're going to all join the conversation today, because we do want this to be a back and forth between all of us here. So we've got the experts, we've got the marketers. We need to communicate and see if we can't get some of your questions answered. So join our conversation on Twitter. Now we have the hashtag that you see there, Sherpa Webinar, at the bottom of your screen. And you can also ask us questions by filling out the question box in the left-hand corner. Now, John and I will be monitoring these questions during the presentation and including the hashtag. And so I'll let you know as we're sending all these attendees a copy of the presentation, and we'll be constantly updating and letting you know if there's anything that we can't get to. We'll try and follow up with you later. So let's talk a little bit about what we're getting into today. A little bit more about research here at MarketingSherpa. Our goal here is to provide you with the most up-to-date research. Now, the way that we do this is to analyze those best practice tactics for improving your marketing performance. So how do we do that? Well, we survey thousands of marketers, and they help us find out what works and what doesn't. And so those results yield our targeted benchmark report guides and handbooks. And as you see the cycle here, now we take that knowledge and we teach marketers like we do today on webinars. And also we apply those best practices in certification training and summits. We have our optimization summit coming up here quickly. In fact, there's only 2 days left to actually save $500 on that conference. So if you're really interested, you need to reserve your seat. We sold out last year. And really this ongoing entire cycle is fueled by constantly evolving from your feedback, because that's what's important. You tell us what's not working, and we analyze that through research. So as we move forward in this presentation today, we're going to utilize that library. We're going to utilize the collective wisdom of more than 48,000 marketers. Now, through all that research, we have over 5,000 pages and 6,000 charts. That's a lot of research. And we can help you to validate the information that you're learning today. So really, we go beyond the theory, and we're going to give you those proven results backed by research. So let's talk about what we're going to be discussing today. We're going to start off by talking about how you can get strategic about your social marketing, which is something we all need to do. And then we're going to talk about those CMO priorities. And then we're going to get into the social integration of how you can really accelerate your marketing performance. We're going to follow that up by the architecture, and we're going to talk about how you can generate and guide leads to conversion, and then follow that up with a case study, which I know all of you are excited to see about today. And then finally, we're going to talk about one of the most important things is really how can you calculate that for ROI. So with that, I'll turn the presentation over to Sergio to get us started.
Great. Thank you very much, Justin and John. We really couldn't do this without those guys. And thank you very much for joining us it looks like there are hundreds of you already logged in today. So we're going to get started by talking about getting strategic about social marketing. And when we've done our research, we've broken down a model for social marketing maturity in three phases. First, there's the trial phase. An organization, a trial phase organization, doesn't have processes or guidelines for performing social marketing. Because they have a lack of process, it leads marketers to focus tactically on technology instead of strategically on financial performance. The next phase is the transition phase, and this is where an organization has an informal process with just a few guidelines, and it performs them sporadically. These marketers begin to see the payoff of repeatable processes in terms of a financial return, and that financial return is something we're going to talk a lot about today. Finally, the third phase is the strategic phase, and this is when an organization has a formal process with thorough guidelines it routinely performs. Strategic phase marketers are able to optimize their strategy to continually improve social marketing performance and not only prove but increase social marketing ROI. So let's start by doing a poll of what's happening with our audience today. What in terms of where our audience is in social marketing maturity. If your organization does not have a process or guidelines for performing social marketing, please click the trial phase. If you're in the transition phase, if you have an informal process with a few guidelines that you sporadically perform, select transition phase. And finally, if your organization has a formal process with thorough guidelines it routinely performs, select the strategic phase. And let's look at some of the results we're getting. It looks like about 35% of the organizations in our audience are in the strategic page, 34%. And then about 49% are in the transition phase, and 17% are in the strategic phase. What I'm going to show you next is a chart related to the response to the same question from 760 chief marketing officers. And what we found is very similar to what we have in our audience right now. Our CMOs told us that 35% of those CMOs told us that their organization was in the trial phase versus 34% in our audience, so that's very close. 49% of our audience are in the transition phase compared to 46% of CMOs responding to our survey. And 17% of you in our audience are in the strategic phase, where you have formal processes with thorough guidelines you routinely perform, as opposed to 19% in our organization. So this is very good because this presentation has been geared towards organizations in each of these phases, and it's nice that we all are matching up here with what our research shows us. The first thing that we want to understand as we're trying to monetize social marketing is what the priorities and perceptions that chief marketing officers have for social marketing. And one of the questions that we get from you, from the audience in advance, comes from Randy, who asked, told us, we are our preferred developer consultant on Facebook. I'd like to learn how our C-level clients are shifting their ideas and budgets toward campaigns and applications on Facebook. Well, Randy, that's right in line with what we're looking at here. You wanted to know about what's changing your clients' minds, or what's influencing your clients about spending on social media. And what this research, what this chart is showing us, is that the priorities over time have been changing for social media. Now it's all about the financial return. It's now show me the money. And what this chart shows is the second set of bars which are circled in yellow here, are showing us that achieving or increasing measurable ROI from social marketing programs is one of the top priorities for CMOs today. And if you're in the strategic phase, which is the pink bar within that group, 2/3 of the organizations have that as a top priority versus only 1/3 of the organizations in the trial phase who have that as a top priority. So the goal of the social media monetization, or the social channel monetization, is to be able to measure and produce a return on investment. And as that chart shows, strategic phase organizations are 80% more likely than organizations in the trial phase to have this as a priority. And the reason for this is, if you're one of the large percentage, whatever it was, 35% that are still in the trial phase, you don't have a process yet for performing social marketing, which means you also don't have a way of measuring the results of or the return on investment from social marketing programs. So you're unlikely to have this as a priority if you don't have the methods in place yet to perform these things. The next is the perception about what's driving social marketing investment. So Randy, your clients, they're being moved by the perceptions that they have about return on investment. What this chart is showing us, the bars at the top of this chart, is that for 47% of organizations that are in the strategic phase of social marketing maturity, social marketing is already producing a measurable ROI. So their attitude is that they're going to continue to invest in this tactic. Those strategic phase marketers are 4 times as likely as those in the trial phase to produce a measurable ROI. And the reason is, again, trial phase marketers tend not to have the processes. They're not able to produce any proof of ROI, so they're not getting more investment in the channel. That's one of the main reasons for becoming more strategic about social media marketing. For a long time in the early phases of social marketing, ROI wasn't considered an objective. Today, it's a reality. And what our research also showed us that on average, the average social media ROI for the 760 CMOs that replied was 95%. That's nearly doubling their investment. 25% of CMOs were actually doubling their investment, which is 100% return on investment. For every $1 they spent on social marketing, they got $2 back. Overcoming the myth that marketing ROI isn't measurable is behind us now. We know it's measurable. We know how to do it. And later we're going to talk to you about actually a formula for calculating social marketing ROI that will work with in the C-suite. So when we talk about how to get to the point of producing an ROI, a lot of it comes down to tactics. How are we going to do things to accelerate social marketing performance? And one of the key tactics for doing that is integration with other channels, particularly search. Integrating search and social media is now essential. According to 76% of the 3,300 marketers in this study, they agreed that many natural search listings today are linked to social media content. So the integration of social media and SEO tactics is now an absolute necessity. Social algorithms are focusing on fresher, more relevant content, which is a characteristic in social media. So organic search particularly, but also paid search, is needed to drive that traffic to social media content that will allow you to build communities and so forth in your social media programs. Together, social media and organic search will accelerate inbound lead generation and conversion if you've constructed your programs properly. We asked a question of marketers, are you integrating social media and SEO tactics specifically to increase inbound lead generation? And nearly half responded that they were. That's a fairly significant amount who are using inbound lead generation and conversion as an objective for integration of social media and search. One of the things that we also looked at, and this is one of our last charts, so if you're tired of looking at charts, I apologize, but there will be relief as of the next slide. What we found was that social does impact conversions, not only from search, organic search traffic, but also from pay-per-click traffic. What this chart is showing us is that organic search traffic generated by marketers who use social media are getting a conversion rate of about 27% versus 17% for the conversion rate of non-social media users that are generating organic search traffic. This means that search marketers who integrate social media improve their conversion rate by 59%. And as this applies to organic search, the reason is that rankings, organic search rankings, are driven by relevance. Relevance increases your credibility, and credibility drives conversions. But this doesn't just apply to organic search. What we found in the same study that those marketers who integrated pay-per-click search and social media had a 25% lift in their conversion rates. And the reason is that regardless of where the traffic is coming from, if they're going through a community, a social media community, they're getting information, they're having conversations about your brand, about your product, about their purchase with friends and peers. And they have more trust in what their friends and peers say than what the companies say directly to them through other channels. So to learn more about how marketers are actually integrating search and social media, as well as other channels, to generate more traffic to increase conversions on social media, we did a study of a number of successful social marketing programs to kind of understand the inside workings, how the sausage was made in successful social marketing programs. And what we found was that there is actually an architecture that was common among most of the very successful social marketing programs. And unlike a lot of organizations who have social marketing, they've opened up a lot of different social sites, but they're getting no results, they don't have this architecture. They don't have a way of integrating social media with other channels, and as a result, many of the leads that find their way into their social programs are lost. They fall through the gaps, the cracks in the floor before reaching any point of conversion. So what we found was the successful marketers actually had an architecture, one that we could turn into visuals so that people get a better understanding of how this architecture works. And that's what I'm going to go through with you now. I'm going to show you this hub and spoke architecture. And something you've got to also keep in mind that if you go through the process of developing an architecture like this, what you're also doing are developing those processes and those best practices that will help you achieve the strategic phase of social marketing maturity, which helps you also get closer to measuring and increasing the ROI of your social marketing programs. So the objective of this architecture is to use social media to systematically generate and guide leads to a point of conversion within the architecture. It's a hub and spoke architecture, and it's built on 3 levels. And I'm going to go through each of these levels with you now. Organic search is the first level. It's the foundation of the architecture because today everything begins with a search. Organic search rankings are based on content timeliness and relevancy, which is really a characteristic of social media, especially timeliness. Timeliness is a characteristic of social media content and conversations just by nature. The daily posts or weekly posts on a blog site are constantly producing timely content, then when you add to that relevancy, you're optimizing the value of the timeliness by using search terms and content that permeate the architecture from search through the social sites into the point of conversion. And organic search is the primary driver of lead traffic to the hub and spokes via timely and relevant content. So this is always a great place to start. If you don't have a search strategy, it's very difficult to build a social strategy on top of it. The next level, the second level, are spoke sites. And this is where the synergy of integration really comes into play. There are two types of spoke sites that we use to build this architecture. In the red hemisphere on this, you'll see that it's social networks. And these are, for, as you know, for building communities and relationships through trustworthy engagement. It's where you really make connections with people of common interests and where you really are able to nurture them as future or nurture present customers. The second type of spoke site are multimedia platforms, and that's where we store content and make it accessible throughout the architecture. By breaking this down into just two types of spoke sites, it may be simplifying things, but it's better to work on this from a simpler approach than it is from a more complex approach. And the key to this is when you're starting to integrate the search and social media and content, you're really creating a synergy where the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And that's important because that's how you scale up from a marketing program that is producing so much revenue per dollar invested to doubling the amount of revenue that's produced from every dollar that's invested. One of the things we want to keep in mind here is that what's really important here is that the number of spoke sites isn't what is producing this. It's whether or not these spoke sites each have a plan and a purpose behind them. Because you could have just Facebook and SlideShare on this level for spoke sites, and you may be producing far more leads, far more revenue than an organization that builds their sites with 100 different social sites on this level of the platform. The final level are the hub sites. This is where all of the leads that are generated by search and are nurtured within the second level, the social sites, where they converge and to a point of conversion. And if you look at this as your hub sites as having two common types, blogs are basically today for many organizations, they're the hub of the social marketing strategy. So while your social network sites, your Twitter posts may have a link going to content, often that content is going to be on a blog post. It's going to be fresh content on a blog post. So this is where the websites are where we want leads to converge in this hub. The second part of the strategy here at the hub are websites. They're the hub of the overall marketing strategy for most organizations today. This is where you want your leads to converge and convert. This is where many of your registration page or your e-commerce site, if you have online direct sales, that's where many of these things are located. And because everything is converging on these points, that's how you want your architecture to be set up. You want it to systematically guide people from the search phase into online social communities where they can be nurtured, where they can find peers and friends of common interest and have conversations about your brand, and then move them into the hub for conversion. Because conversion is the points of conversion are so important today, and because the points of conversion are generally landing page registration pages, registration pages on landing pages, or are a purchase point on an e-commerce site, landing page optimization becomes extremely critical to improving the rate of conversion. And as you know, if you have a site where you have a lot of traffic coming into that hub, coming into that conversion point, just an incremental increase by optimizing that landing page, just an incremental increase in either the leads captured or the sales generated can really have a major impact on the return on investment you get from that. So to take it from the architecture into a practical application, I'm going to hand this off to Megan Lockwood, who's going to share a great MarketingSherpa case study with you on a company that applied these practices. Take it away, Megan.
Thanks, Sergio, and I'm really glad to be here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this data and really get into the trenches, like Sergio said, and talk about how one company developed a successful social media and content marketing strategy and really applied all these lessons. So the company is Delivera, and Delivera is an email service provider. And as a result of this content marketing strategy campaign, they saw 70% improvement in overall new inbound leads and a nearly 100% increase in their average annual account revenue. So we're going to start with the problem. And the problem for Delivera is, like a lot of us, they needed more high-quality leads. Most of Delivera's existing sales leads had come from paid third-party sources, which were fatigued and declining in both quantity and quality. They also had a tight budget, so they didn't have any option to spend more on advertising or other outbound approaches. And they also couldn't turn to agencies or other outside resources. So they developed this strategy to drive inbound leads, where prospects came and really seek out Delivera. The benefits of this content marketing campaign from their perspective was it didn't require a huge upfront budget. They could build this campaign from the ground using mostly free tools and other in-house resources. And Delivera had had past experience with their inbound leads, which they found produced the highest quality and the largest sales in terms of hard numbers. So this solution seems ideal, except that a content-based plan really needs content. So they have to figure out where they're going to find all this content. And they also didn't have an existing inbound lead architecture. So they had to build it from the ground with no outside help. So how did Delivera do this? They really implemented a 5-step strategy for inbound marketing, and we're going to go more in depth in each of these in a minute. But essentially, the first step is content. They need a volume of content. Again, they have to identify who is going to create this content for them. And then they need consistent content. So Delivera developed guidelines to align their brand messaging across every one of their channels. Second, they looked at this hub-and-spoke social marketing architecture to get the message out. They built a platform from scratch, and they really capitalized on the best aspects of the social sharing programs. They wanted it to be SEO friendly. So as Sergio just said, for organic search to work, it really needs to be both timely and relevant. You can have great content, but that content needs to be found. So Delivera really focused on updating their content regularly with material that their prospects wanted and web crawlers would seek out. They also used automated marketing tools. With limited bandwidth, I think they only had 2 members of the marketing team. They had to work smarter and not harder. So they activated their contact automation tools, and they linked everything to their CRM system and their sales team, which allowed them to quickly respond to every inbound lead. And finally, they tied all their results to analytics. And I really think that all marketers should love numbers as much as I do, as much as we do, because they really make decisions so much easier. So for Delivera, everything is linked to their analytic tools, and short and long-term business decisions were grounded in real data. So what's step 1? Step 1 is their company's first ever messaging strategy. And they've thought about really moving these prospects from a conversation online to their conversions. So they focused on delivering content on topics that were relevant to their ideal client. In the case of Delivera, they were looking for leads searching for information on email marketing or keywords associated with email marketing. They developed content development guidelines that accurately described who Delivera is and how they differed from their competitors. So writing is hard, and if you need your employees to produce relevant content, you have to make it easy for them because you don't want them staring at a blank piece of paper. So they gave their employees documents outlining the products and the philosophy that they wanted them to write about, and that really helped prevent writer's block and streamline this whole content creation process. And then they provided access to these messaging documents to every employee that they were going to include in the program to get everyone invested in the process and on the same page. So then, once they had the brand messaging guidelines, they applied it across every single channel in the organization. From the website to the customer service team to the sales team, their entire company is repeating the same messaging. And this messaging is repeated in all of their marketing, in all of their social media messages, everywhere they're using the same brand standards. So it's this repetition that's powerful, especially for a company that's using its brand to drive new leads. They also developed a PR strategy to boost their credibility using external press mentions. And again, it's this emphasis on repeating their core company messaging. And it's this time using with press credible sources outside of Delivera. And what they found with the PR strategy is it really helps with their larger scale clients who were paying attention to brand reputation. So rolling out this brand messaging strategy was actually pretty impressive. The pace was what they called shocking. It took 3 weeks overall to identify the strategy and just 9 months to apply it to every single part of Delivera. And integral to this fast-paced adoption was a top-down push. The CEO really got on board. He understood what they were talking about with their social media platforms, and he even writes for some of the blogs himself.
You know, that last step, Megan, actually ties into a question that we collected on our registration page. This one coming from Phyllis. She said, I was hoping to hear a strong argument for the effectiveness of marketing B2B solutions on Facebook.
Well, that's great, and I have an answer for you, Phyllis. So I'm glad you asked that because integrating Facebook and other social sharing is really what Delivera did in step 2, where they set up their social marketing architecture. And this is the hub and spoke that we were talking about. This whole social content strategy is focused on designing an online conversation around email marketing between Delivera and its audience. And the social platforms and their website is where this conversation happened. So Delivera actually started with their blog, which became the foundation of their architecture. So to Phyllis's point, they didn't actually start with Facebook. They wanted to build a rich foundation of content before they started outreach on social sites. So the blog called Mail Chatter became the first face for Delivera's new brand and content strategy. They had a very active outreach campaign with daily posts and sometimes more. And again, as I said earlier, the CEO really got behind this. He writes some of the blogs and he pushes his employees and other members of the team to really contribute relevant, timely content. And so the second part is then what we're talking about in looking at social media sharing. So once the blog is published, it's pushed on all social media channels. And this is where Facebook comes in. Once Delivera had relevant content to share, they then pushed it out to its audience. They created a company Facebook page, and they also reached out using Twitter and LinkedIn and a few niche local sites that they'd identified as relevant to their email marketing audience. But critical to this whole social marketing architecture is that everything ties back to the hub. All social media mentions include links that point the audience member back to the main website, which houses even more information about email marketing and the company. So step 3 is when Delivera looked to add more high-value content to boost SEO and conversions on the company website. So this overall process for Delivera is centered around making it an online resource for its customers. And they really had 2 phases of this content-rich strategy. Steps 1 and 2 that we just discussed were phase 1. They added more content, and they tried to get notice among their audience and build their reputation using their blog, their website, and other social profiles. Then they really wanted to prove the success of social media and content marketing before they moved forward. After several months, they looked at their data, and they had success, so they took results to their C-suite, and they gained support to continue. And phase 2 is step 3. It's integrating all of this to drive more inbound leads with really robust content. They had new content in 2 parts. The first is open access, so new how-to articles on email marketing on the main website. And these open access articles were rich in keywords that appealed to search engines and also further established Delivera's expertise to their ideal client. And then secondarily, they had premium content, which they, in the form for Delivera of case studies and white papers. Now, this premium content was housed behind a lead generation form. And they received contact information, and then with that contact information, they fed it directly into Delivera's CRM platform and handed it off to their sales team. So now the step 3 is how they find the leads, but now they have to run them down. So step 4 is using auto-respond tools to quickly feed leads to their sales team. And I actually, John, saw a seated question earlier this week from Michael O'Connor. I don't know if Michael's out there, but he asked about content marketing automation. And so this is what Delivera did, one company did, to really look at automation. And what Delivera found was that their inbound leads converted much more quickly overall than their paid leads. They also required less touches, but you have to nurture them differently than you would paid search leads. Paid search leads that Delivera had were already automated. If a contact had no prior relationship with Delivera, they received a 5-part email series to familiarize themselves with the company. With inbound leads, however, you have to be careful because they've already interacted with the company, and so you don't want to annoy them or overwhelm them. Inbound leads have already told you specifically what they want to learn about from your site, so you need to make sure that they get that content, but just that content. They also have more background. Typically, inbound leads have done a lot more research, so you want to be careful not to send them too much additional or background company information because it's going to start to look like spam. So Delivera found that they do have to be careful, but they also have to quickly act on leads. When someone fills out a lead generation form on Delivera's website, an auto response is immediately triggered via email that sends a confirmation email and the content the lead requested. But again, it's a confirmation email and only the content that the lead requested. Then all of these leads, they flow into Delivera's CRM system, and they're automatically assigned a salesperson. And sales agreed to contact that individual via telephone within 24 hours of receiving the lead. So there's really an integration and relationship between sales and marketing using this auto-response marketing. And what they found was that this automation lets a small marketing team do more. According to the project lead, they really created an army of 2. And so finally, the last step in this process for Delivera was to measure everything. Measure everything and then optimize. For inbound leads, Delivera monitors every lead source individually and tracks specific key performance indicators. The ones that they track and they pay a lot of attention to are the number of leads captured, the ratio of leads to sales, the average value of those sales, and the average return on investment. And these numbers are their proof. It's the proof that the strategy was working, and it's the data that allowed Delivera to roll into phase 2. And they also use this analytics to determine which of Delivera's inbound channels are performing and which need to be tweaked a little bit. They make both micro and macro level adjustments on this data. So on the short term, they can change links and calls to action in real time. And for the long term, from a marketing planning perspective, this real data allows Delivera to focus their budgets on the lead sources that produce the highest revenue. So what's the bottom line? And the bottom line for Delivera was interesting. They actually found that inbound leads typically cost a little bit more in terms of overall time and money to pull apart. But their returns really, really make it worthwhile. And the numbers do speak for themselves. Since early 2010, Delivera saw a 20% increase in overall website traffic. They had better SEO for all major keywords, in some cases cutting major keywords in half. The blog nets 3 to 4 times more site traffic than Delivera's website that saw a 20% increase in overall traffic. So overall, they saw a 70% increase in new inbound leads, and they nearly doubled their average annual revenue per each account. And that's what you can take to your CEO. That's your story. You can do this. You can double your revenue using social media. It's possible, it's quantifiable, and this was very, very successful. And on that note, I'm going to hand it back over to Sergio to talk about metrics, but I believe that we may have another, I think we just are going to talk about the question in a second.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Megan. That's a very nice case study. And while you were talking, I saw a question come over chat from Crystal. And she wanted to know about examples like this one for Delivera that were related to B2B manufacturers, very industrial applications. And the one that I can think of first, Crystal, and you might want to look this up on MarketingSherpa.com in our articles and case studies that are online there, is Cisco Systems. They use social media in a number of ways for their industrial channels, for their technology channels, and as a matter of fact, they were one of the companies that we kind of dissected their social marketing program in order to come up with the hub and spoke strategy. So now we've talked a bit about what's behind monetizing the social marketing channel, but now we want to give you a very practical, very tried and true approach to actually calculating social marketing return on investment, one that can be understood with the people who matter in your company. And first we want to just clarify something. It may seem really obvious, but ROI, return on investment, is a measure of financial value returned on every dollar invested. That might seem like an obvious statement, but it's amazing how many people are not focused on ROI simply as a dollar-for-dollar calculation. The challenge is that tracking the right metrics for determining the values or the return and the costs or the investment of social media marketing. This quote is from one of the chief marketing officers that gave us some insight in our study. And he said around 10% of their social media activity directly translates to bottom line results, making ROI easy to determine for that portion of their efforts. However, 90% of the work that goes into this has to do with people building their reputation online and helping others so they can effectively promote the brand online. That big chunk, that 90% of work, is impossible to measure in terms of ROI. Well, that's okay. It's okay that you're going to focus on the return side on only that 10% of activity that does translate to the bottom line, and we'll show you why and how. When it comes to calculating social media ROI, there are some metrics that matter more than others. As this piece of artwork shows, there are metrics that can be measured, and there are metrics that should be measured, and it's those metrics in the overlap, those metrics that matter most, that you need to use in your ROI calculations. Qualitative, non-financial metrics can be measured. Quantitative financial metrics should be measured. And these financial values are metrics that matter most for proving ROI. And remember, again, from the slide before where I said this may seem obvious, but you have to consider ROI based on financial values, not on things that you've seen like return on engagement or return on innovation or other uses of the acronym that really mean nothing when you've got to go to the C-suite and prove your value to get further budget and investment.
That's a good point. So it ties into this question from Patsy, Sergio. How do small companies begin to use social media to improve that ROI?
Well, Patsy, the answer is, first of all, most don't. As we saw in the initial poll, there are about 20% of marketers and organizations at large, and about the same, about 20% of the marketers in this audience today who have not reached the strategic phase of social marketing maturity, so they're not in a position to measure their ROI yet, so they can't determine whether they're improving it or not. But I'm going to show you how. I'm going to show you how if we go through this and kind of look at it in terms of what needs to be measured and how to measure it and then how to calculate ROI, it will help organizations who are getting to that strategic phase where they have the processes and the guidelines in place for social media and can start actually measuring ROI. First of all, these are some values that CMOs don't use to calculate ROI. And I won't go through this research, but everything we're doing here is based on these studies. There are many values, as I said, that can be measured. There are things like the estimated value of quantitative social media metrics, things like likes on Facebook, followers on Twitter. They're really, some people do it and they attempt it, but it's really difficult to place a value on the number of followers you have in Twitter. It's great to have a lot of followers. It's great to have relevant posts on Twitter so that your followers are relevant, expect and use this relevancy to find content that they need. But the number of followers is really difficult to turn into a financial value. There are also the estimated value of qualitative social media metrics that a lot of organizations attempt to put a value on. Things like social media sentiment and your social media voice. These are things that, while you can use tools to measure subjectively, but still measure sentiment, for example, it's very difficult to say what the value, what the dollar value, the specific dollar value of sentiment is. So some of these values that you don't use to calculate ROI, they are useful for other things. They're useful for monitoring your audience to determine where you should be in social media and even what you should be saying in social media, but they're not useful to measure ROI. Some of the values that CMOs do use to calculate their return, the return side of the ROI equation, are if you have a direct sales site, for example, where you can actually go from a post on Facebook directly to a product page that allows you to purchase, then you can measure things like the actual value of sales generated by social marketing programs. You can track back from the original source or the nurturing source of the traffic to the point of conversion for a sale and measure that as part of your return. Also, there's the estimated value of new leads generated by social marketing programs, especially if you're on the B2B side. Most B2B organizations have a very specific value placed on every qualified lead they generate, and that value can be used, as we'll use in the example I give you for calculating ROI at the end of this. It's how you can use that lead to determine what your ROI is. There are two sides of the coin for values, though. There is the additional revenue you produce, but there's also the costs that you save. And social media has proven to reduce the cost of things like customer support and customer acquisition programs. And this cost savings should be integrated. You've got to remember that there are two ways to gain that value. As I said, there's increasing income and reducing costs. It's a missed opportunity if you don't factor in the reduced costs into your ROI equations as well, when possible. So which values can and should you use to calculate social marketing ROI? That's on the value side. On the cost side, or the investment side, it's a little easier. On the investment side, every marketing group has a budget to work with. They spend that budget, and every time they spend that budget, it has to be put into one silo or another for expense. And this is how we come up with the costs. It's a little easier. But when we look at the costs of social media, they tend to fall into two main media categories. There's the earned or owned media on one side, and then there's paid media on the other side. Earned media is more time intensive. It's a tactic that requires human resources. And so as this chart shows, the bar on the far left is for staff salaries and staff-related expenses. This is where most money goes towards social media, and most of that goes toward producing the earned and owned media that are being applied to their social media programs. On the other side of the coin is what's represented in the second bar from the left, which represents paid advertising on social media sites. This is earned media, and this is less time-intensive than earned media is. I mean, this is paid media. It's less time-intensive than earned media is, but it is more cash-intensive. It does require fewer resources, but it also requires mostly capital on that side. So that's where most of your costs are going to fall when calculating. There are other expenses too. If you use an agency or use a paid monitoring solution, those may fall into the program as well. But the human resource costs of earned media and the capital costs of paid media are going to be your two primary factors for calculating ROI. So let's have an example here. Let's take the formula, create a formula, and then apply it to an example. First of all, the formula, and this is a time-tested, this is universally accepted, the formula for calculating the ROI of social marketing or any other business program for that matter, and that's understandable to the C-suite, is taking the value gained from your investment minus the cost of the investment and dividing that by the cost of the investment, and that gives you your ROI. As an example, let's take a campaign. Maybe it's the campaign and the case study that Megan gave us, and it's a social media lead generation campaign. And this organization knows that every qualified lead that's generated in this campaign is worth $150 to them as a lead. And in this case, they generated 500 qualified leads that they were able to track back to social media. Plus, they had some additional staff costs and other expenses that equaled $15,000. So if we take and put this into our formula, the 500 qualified leads at $150 value per lead equals $75,000, minus the $15,000 in costs divided by the $15,000 in costs gives us a 400% return on investment for this program. So that's how we get to the point where we not only monetize social marketing, the social marketing channel, but we also prove the value in terms of ROI of monetizing this channel and feed that information to change the perceptions of those who determine the financial future of your marketing organization. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Megan to talk about our key takeaways from today's event.
Thanks so much, Sergio. So what did we learn today? And the first thing we learned is that you need to get strategic about social marketing. Companies with a formal process and thorough guidelines on how they're executing their social marketing are 4 times more likely to successfully produce a measurable ROI. Second is that ROI is important because that's what matters to your CMO. 25% of CMOs are doubling their social media investment, but you need to show them the money. Third, integrating social media with other channels, particularly paid search and search engine optimization, will magnify the return on all channels and accelerate performance. Develop a hub and spoke architecture to channel your leads to your specific conversion point. Consider content marketing as a means of driving new inbound leads like Delivera did, and you can potentially double your revenue and new accounts by inbound marketing. And finally, today we talked about monetizing social media. So communicate ROI with the same metrics in the same language that your C-suite uses to talk about return and investment. Make sure you're making the case for social media in a language that the influencers in your company can easily digest. And those are the 6 key takeaways from the webinar today.
Megan, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. And just before we have some time for a couple of questions that John will be getting to, but I wanted to let everybody know I've had a lot of requests for this. This is a special offer on the handbook Normally it's $397. This is from the research today. It will give you a step-by-step guide on getting that architecture that you're looking to set up. So go ahead and follow that mechlabs.com/100-FB for our Facebook-sponsored webinar today. And by using that promo code there, you can redeem and save an additional $100. So let's go ahead. We have the remaining couple minutes here. And John, we have some questions that weren't able to get to. Let's start with those.
Sure. The first one is coming from Kara. She was talking about the hub and spoke architecture. She wanted to know, when we're referencing the hub, is that just the main page, or is it a group of targeted landing pages? Sergio,
sorry,
maybe
I was on.
That one?
Yeah, I was on mute. I started talking without it. Well, Kara, on the hub is where your convergence and conversion points are, and typically, and it can include other platforms as well, but typically the hub includes a company's website and a company's blog posts, singular or plural. It may also include, if it's a separate platform, a company's e-commerce or store site. But it is the point where, from the social media side, where a lot of timely and relevant content is, which if you look at that as the blog, and where there is a conversion point. And typically it is your website where registration pages are placed for capturing leads and so forth. So that's what the hub primarily consists of, blogs and websites.
Okay. Now I actually have one from Dave as well. Dave was referencing Pinterest. He kind of wanted to know whether that was considered a social network or a multimedia platform by our definition of the hub and spoke architecture. Yeah,
well, Dave, Pinterest can be considered either one, but I would put it in the category of a social network. It's more about the postings, I think, than it is a specialized content site, and to help you define a specialized content site like a multimedia site, that's where you can not only present content like YouTube and videos, but it's also where you can distribute that content. So, for example, a video on YouTube can be posted on a website page, posted on a blog post, linked to a Twitter feed or a Twitter post or a Facebook post. So, if you look at it in those terms, I would consider Pinterest a social network. Again, the architecture that we showed you, for the sake of being able to comprehend it a little easier, we simplified things and generalized things. But if I were to simplify and generalize this, I would say Pinterest should be in the social network side of the architecture.
Okay. Well, we've got time for, I think, one more question. I'll go ahead and pose this one coming from Kevin. He wanted us to sort of explain social media for search marketing. He wanted to know if it was just optimizing the social communication for search, or if there was some other facets involved.
Megan, you want to field this one? Well, I think that it sort of depends. You want everything to work together. So the idea is to make sure that you have, the same relevant messaging on a lot of different channels. So you can, I think that it depends what your core strategy is. You can certainly optimize your blog posts. Everything that you do is going to increase your visibility on the search marketing, because as Sergio said before, any new blog posts that you have are really going to help you generate new and more relevant content that web crawlers really pay attention to. The fresher and the richer your database of material is behind your website, the more likely the web crawlers are and the search engines are going to be to find you and to look at your content.
Now,
is there anything you would add,
Sergio?
Sergio?
Get to everybody's questions today, but I would encourage you to reach out to both Sergio and Megan. Their email addresses are listed here, so please feel free to send over any questions that you have. Justin, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, just want to remind everybody that we are going to be sending the slides and the audio presentation to you tomorrow in your email. So thanks again to all our speakers for presenting this content, and we look forward to hearing back from you again. Thank you, and have a great afternoon.